Trump's Domestic Terrorism Executive Order, Security or Suppression. Welcome back to the Second to None podcast, where every voice matters and every perspective counts. I'm your host, DJ, and today we're tackling one of the most controversial political moves in recent history, President Trump's Domestic Terrorism Executive Order. This order has already sparked intense debate across America and around the world. Supporters argue it's about protecting the nation from rising threats, while critics warn it could be the most aggressive step yet towards silencing political opposition. In the next 15 minutes, we'll break down what the executive order says, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these critical conversations. Segment 1. The Basics. So let's start with the basics. Earlier this week, President Trump signed an executive order directing federal agencies, including the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and the Treasury Department, to crack down on what he calls domestic terrorism networks. Now, here's where it gets complicated. The order doesn't just target violent extremists. It includes financial investigations, the possibility of revoking tax-exempt status for organizations accused of supporting political violence, and it gives federal agencies broad authority to shut down groups that are deemed to be part of a so-called domestic terror pipeline. The language is broad, and that's exactly why it's controversial. What counts as a domestic terrorism network? Who decides? And what's the standard of proof before an organization loses its rights or funding? Segment 2. The political context. To really understand this, we need to place it in context. Over the past few years, political violence has been on the rise. We've seen attacks at rallies, violent protests in the streets, and most recently, the shocking assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk at a college event. Trump has positioned himself as the law and order president, responding to what his supporters see as left-wing extremism. But critics say the order is dangerously one-sided. Notice how the focus is almost exclusively on left-wing groups, even though right-wing violence has also been documented. So is this about security or is it about politics? Is the administration using the tragedy of political violence to consolidate power and weaken opposition voices? That's the heart of the debate. Segment 3. Supporters' perspective. Let's be fair and look at both sides. Supporters of the order argue that America has been too soft on domestic extremism. They say groups that promote violence, whether online or offline, need to be treated with the same seriousness as international terror cells. They also point to the financial side. By tracking funding streams, they argue law enforcement can shut down networks before violence occurs. And to many Americans, the idea of using federal power to keep communities safe sounds reasonable. In fact, some legal scholars note that similar authority has been used against organized crime families and drug cartels. So, for supporters, this isn't about politics. It's about finally giving law enforcement the tools they need to protect Americans. Now, let's flip the coin. Critics of this executive order are sounding the alarm. They argue the language is intentionally vague, allowing the government to label almost any opposition group as domestic terrorists. Think about it. Protest groups, nonprofits, or even activist organizations could suddenly find themselves under investigation with their funding frozen, their leaders arrested, or their tax status revoked. Critics say this is a blueprint for silencing dissent. Civil liberties advocates compare it to McCarthyism in the 1950s, when people were blacklisted not for what they did, but for what they believed. The fear is that political protest, free speech, and grassroots organizing could all be swept up under the banner of counterterrorism. And once that power is granted, history shows it's very hard to roll back. Segment 5. The DOJ, FBI, and trust in institutions. This debate also ties directly into the credibility of our institutions. The Department of Justice and the FBI are supposed to stand above politics, but in recent years, their independence has been questioned. From the Comey indictment to accusations of bias, these agencies are already under intense scrutiny. Now, with the executive order, they're being asked to act as referees in a deeply polarized political environment. Can Americans trust them to make fair decisions? Or will their actions always be seen as partisan? The future of institutional trust may hinge on how this order is enforced. Segment 6. Why this matters to everyday Americans. At the end of the day, this isn't just about Washington politics. It's about you. If you're part of a nonprofit, a political organization, or even a community group, this executive order could affect you. It could determine whether your organization can raise money, hold events, or even exists without being labeled a threat. And beyond that, it sets the tone for how America balances two critical values: safety and freedom. Do we give up some freedoms in the name of security? Or do we risk insecurity in the name of freedom? That's the age-old question, and this executive order puts it front and center. Segment 7. The Second to None commentary and call to action. Here at the Second to None podcast, we don't just repeat the headlines. We challenge the narratives. And this one raises tough questions. Should government power be expanded when threats are real, even if it risks political abuse? How do we hold leaders accountable when they use executive orders that bypass Congress? And how do we, as everyday citizens, protect both our safety and our rights? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we believe in having the conversation. Because only through dialogue, debate, and understanding different perspectives can we keep our democracy alive. So, what do you think? Is Trump's Domestic Terrorism Executive Order a necessary tool to keep America safe, or is it a dangerous step towards silencing dissent? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the podcast and share this episode with a friend. Every perspective matters here, and we want yours to be part of the discussion. I'm Ann Clark, and this has been the Second to None podcast. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, your voice is powerful.